Believe he's the champion of Jackson. And I'm just here to honor the blessing. Corner well, he thinks that he's it. Scotty's just a lonely he'll get. Sometimes we are joined by around that. It's just that they are so quiet. You wouldn't notice that. It's the Dobbers, DobberCast. Dobbers, DobberCast. It's the Dobbers, DobberCast. Listen to the DobberCast, yeah.
Hey everyone, Connor here from the Dobbers, and this week we have myself and Greg as we go through the SRs for Attack on Titan. I'm going to put them into a wee tier list.
Not bad, mate. How you doing?
Aye, not bad, not bad. Are you ready for this?
Ready,
Obviously,
ready as I'll ever be.
so we broke it down to 3 categories. So we're going with meta relevant, sleepers, so cards that we think have more potential than they currently do, and then local / fun decks, things you'll just typically see maybe somebody throw random ones in. All good with that?
Exactly. Yeah, sounds good.
Right, okay. Let's go in with the first one. Which I think the first one we have to obviously mention is Beast Titan. He does have the classification of SR, obviously under a slightly different theme, I guess, with the characters.
Yeah, exactly. With it being the character rarity kind of thing that the classification are doing, rather than the actual rarity, but it's still worth talking about, I think.
Yeah, I think so. So, for everyone that doesn't know, obviously Beast Titan, 5 hand size character, 33 health. If the first attack, when it resolves, you build it face down. If it gets shift, you build it. Attack Titan, build backups enter or leaves your stage, you draw one. What we thinking? What are we thinking for this SR? Because this is your technically favourite.
He's definitely one of my favorites, but I think as much as I love him, I think he is a local fun deck. Like I think there's a lot he can do, and when he gets going really well. But it's just a case of getting him to that point. I think is the issue. Like I think we've mentioned previously, just making sure that he can get off the ground and get rolling. But it's going to take time, especially with him being a 5-hander. And if he breaks hard.
Yeah, totally agree. For the most part, I feel as if like this is just the kind of like honorary mention for once. So
Yeah, no,
I feel like
100%, yeah.
we shouldn't really ramble too much on this guy. So let's dive
Yeah.
straight into the first of the air secret rares. So we have high speed dive. It's a 6 diff, 4 mid for 7 damage. It's got weapon keyword. It's got blitz. If this is the only attack in your card pool, your attacks get +2 speed this turn. And deadlock blitz. Add an attack with a printed difficulty. Oh no, it's not even printed, so it's just added an attack with a difficulty of 2 from your discard pile to hand. That's even better than I thought, actually. Personally, I love this card.
Yeah, I agree. I really like the card. It almost gives the same kind of vibes as the UR from Girl Power for the Reciprocal Turbo Kick, something like that it's called.
Yeah.
The one that gives you all your other kicks 2 speed for the turn, and this obviously doesn't specify other attacks, so it buffs itself as well, which is nice. Has the blitz, so it's a bit less interactable, giving speed to everything, which is nice. So decks like Levi, Mikasa really use this card really well with that lingering effect and things like that. So I think it's very strong.
Yeah,
Obviously, the deadlock is relevant.
Yeah, the deadlock is definitely relevant. Like I feel as you were saying, like I feel like this card's like with Mikasa and like Levi looking very strong in the 2B meta. Like I think you'll just see this a lot.
Yeah,
Because essentially,
100%. I agree.
yeah, because essentially it is just a 6 mid 7 because you're going to blitz it in and it gets itself as well. So it's like I can see where they've designed it where it's like let's have it not be too fast because it's immediately just getting 2 speed when it enters play.
Yeah. No, 100%. And like I said, the decks like Mikasa who can use this card to its fullest just to have the attacks that give speed to everything, clear them, draw cards, and when things hit, and just cycle your hand essentially. It feels really strong, and I do think there's the fact it's not the the speed buff isn't keyword locked is another big thing as well. It's not dictating a specific type of attack you get the speed on. The fact it's just a blanket your attacks get 2 speed feels really strong.
Yeah, it definitely allows you that option to, like, because it's obviously attuned, it allows you that option to throw in like any deck.
Yeah, 100%.
So I personally think this is meta relevant.
I think I'd have to agree with you. I think I'd agree.
The first agreement, that's fine. Because obviously for those watching as well, Adam is not here, so we do not have a tiebreaker. We just have Greg's overriding vote and then my editor overriding vote. so I'm waiting for the one card that we like horribly disagree on.
Yep. Oh, it's coming.
Right, well, let's see if it's the next one then. Is it Whirling Slash, the 4 diff, 3 high for 5 damage? Weapon keyword again. I should also mention it's got a 2 high block, this one. And it's got Blitz. Commit up to 3 foundations. This attack and your next attack get +1 speed for each committed foundation committed this way. If you committed at least 1 foundation this way, draw 1 card. Oh, if you committed 3 foundations this way, your next air attack this turn gets -3 difficulty. Oh.
Now, after we've read that Yu-Gi-Oh effect, what do you think?
Oh, I'll be honest with you. I've read this a couple of times, right, and I've actually just realised the very first part of it says this attack and you're next.
Yeah,
I never even noticed that the first time.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I think I've genuinely overread that about 3 or 4 times when I looked at that. This is now even better than what I initially thought. Because I just assumed the speed was on it, not the next attack as well.
Yeah.
That's silly. That's such a powerful card. Out of curiosity, right? Just as I'm seeing it saying, so it says your next air attack, right? But it's air in circle. What happens if your attack is in a tune there?
I assume it would still apply.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, just because it is legit
yeah.
now, 2 different things. I wonder, curiosity on that one.
Yeah. I presume it would still apply, I think. Just obviously, I think it's easier for printing reasons to print the air symbol like that
Yeah,
and
as
backpack rather than do the air. Otherwise, then it doesn't synergize with any of the cards in the Attack on Titan set.
Yeah, that's actually generally what I was thinking.
Yeah. I think it would probably apply to the air attune cards as well. I could be wrong. So
Yeah, just as I'm seeing it
think
for the
that's
first,
where
I
I
think this is
read
one of the first times we're seeing, like, obviously keyword, or sorry, symbol locked scenarios, but now we have like the attunement kicking in. It's just it's probably good to ask. Probably not something we
100%.
fully need to FAQ, but considering some of the other
definitely.
stuff that they FAQ'd, I feel as if like their question.
Yeah, it's definitely something that should probably be checked, even if they don't FAQ it, probably checked with your local judge or anyone in the community or even in a Discord server. So yeah, definitely worth checking that out, I think.
No, this card feels like very strong. Like, so you're committing. I mean, because even if you just commit like one foundation, you get a draw.
Yeah.
Obviously, ideally, you want to essentially do the all 3 foundations. You want the full effect.
Yeah.
You want the +3 on this attack, +3 on the next. You want the draw, -3 diff on. Like, that's ideally what you want, but even then, like, literally just popping this for a speed and a draw on a commit 1 doesn't sound horrendous.
Yeah. No, 100%. I do feel like you either commit 1, you commit 3, or you just don't run the card, to be honest. 'Cause if you're not committing anything with this card, then it's just a 3 high for 5 at that point, really. So you need to be prepared to commit things, even if the check's not great. So it just becomes that question of how high do you want the difficulty to be, essentially. Is the main thing. I think the card's good, but I don't think it's as much of a home run for me as it is for you. I do think there's places for it. It's just for me, like, say for example, you start with this card, you check a 5, you activate the blitz ability. How much do you want to commit to then make this attack in your next one better? Like, for example, would you want this to be essentially at that point an 8 diff, 6 high for 5 that draws a card, gives your next attack -3 difficulty +3 speed? That'd be something you'd want. And it's all about those scenarios. I think I do like it's got the flexibility of commit up to 3. That's a big thing for me. I really like that. It's not a case of just commit out for this effect regardless. So I think it is still irrelevant. I think it's worth keeping an eye on because I think in a lot of the style of decks that it's going to be seen, that it could be in, it's going to be seen as a 3 or a 4 of definitely, with the amount of card advantage, committal effects for different symbols, for things like the Anasa 3 diff that can draw a card when you commit it to pay for an effect, for example, that kind of thing. Things that re-ready in the air symbol as well. So I definitely think it's meta relevant, but it could go between that and a sleeper for me. Like I think there's a lot there.
Do you? Well, what about right? So I would probably put it like high sleeper, low meta relevant
I think that's
overall.
where I'm thinking as well.
Only because there's a handful of people. Because I feel as if it's definitely like Mikasa Levi will run this.
Yeah,
And
100%.
it's just how much do they define the card as well. I'm probably also basing quite a few opinions on certain characters as well.
Yeah, 100%. Whereas things like high speed dive, for example, I can see that being run in a lot of different decks because of the generic 2 speed on everything,
Yeah,
and it's not even a terrible opener. Like a 6 mid for 7 is an opener that gives all your other attack stats, feels good. Whereas this is very much a Levi / Mikasa card with maybe a couple of exceptions in some of the older sets. But I do think it's probably high sleeper. I had to
yeah,
guess.
I
Definitely
can go
worth
with
keeping
that.
an eye on.
I think I can go with
Yeah.
that. I sleep. Right. Moving on to the first of the Chaos SRs.
Mm-hmm.
So we have Fortitude of the Armored Titan. 5 def. This is also an action. I will quickly point out I do not like the fact it's kind of hard to tell it's an action, other than just a little
Yeah.
bit of highlighted color around the words.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's the only way you can really tell about that. Like I do like the design of them, how it's give and take. I like how they look a lot more like SRs and stand out, but they should make it clearer what their cards are. Is the
Yeah,
other issue.
yeah, definitely. Like, cause I feel bad as well because I feel as if like it's one of the times where I'm like I don't really have a direct answer to how I'd make it better,
Yeah,
but at the same time I'm just like make it better.
yeah. It's one of those. It's hard to quantify. Really, it's just you want something else. You just don't know what that thing is.
Yeah. So right, so we got Fortitude of the Armored Titan. It's got remove this card when it leaves your card pool, and that's the static part of it. And the enhance is this attack loses all keywords. Attacks your rival. Play this turn, get +1 difficulty. There is a couple of decks I can see playing this that just probably become like a pure menace.
Yeah, I agree. It's very much an anti-pick based on what you think you're going to see. It shuts down things like Toga 3 because obviously they don't get the weapon for the responses and things like that in certain parts of their kit. Falling Skies decks and things like Chaco 4 kind of get knocked by this if you're not doing just the high package and you're doing charges as well.
Yep.
Obviously it doesn't change the zone, but it gets rid of the charge keyword. Same with like range decks, range packages with things like Shoto 4 and potentially Endeavor 3. If they're doing like the fire symbol range package, or like it's things that care about ranged and all that. I do like it, and it feels like a good sideboard piece, but I don't know if I'd ever see a deck maining it depending on the meta that we go into.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same scenario here. Like, so it feels like one of those immediate sideboards. You maybe put 2 in a sideboard. You
Yeah,
just know that at some point you might need it. It's good to
100%.
have. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I couldn't see me mainboarding this card straight off the bat unless
Not
there's
unless
like
there's
some
something like
defined.
me. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Like some sort of defined meta relevant deck, like something like if Levi becomes triple S tier and just takes down all the events, bring this in, main this to go right. Your things aren't weapons or charges anymore,
yeah,
kind of thing. So it doesn't get those extra little buffs. But I do think it's a really good sideboard piece, so it's definitely worth to keep an eye on.
Yep. Yeah,
I think
definitely.
it'll
Think
be
I
a
would.
good sleeper.
I feel like it's like obviously we've got not much in sleeper yet, but I feel as if like other sort of ones I would put in sleeper probably jump above it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that one feels like an easy. So,
Yeah.
next up, we have well orchestrated attack, 5 diff, 5 high for 4 damage with a 2 check. Got the keyword weapon, and its blitz is the rival mills 1. So they mill 1 off the top of the deck. If the mill card is an attack, draw 3 cards. Otherwise, draw 1. This attack gets +1 damage for each card in your hand. What do you think about this one?
I love it. Honestly, I love the card. At the very worst, it replaces itself, and even if it's the last card in your hand, it's a very minimum of 5 high for 5. It mills your opponent and gets you another card. On average, if you start with this, for example, it becomes you say you're playing a 6-hander, you start with this card, it's a 5 high for 10 at that point at base, if not a 5 high for 12, and it has to be answered at that point. It's good speed, off zone block as well. Relevant keyword being the weapon. It just feels really good. The 2 check does worry me a little bit, especially with the way the game's kind of shifting with some of these higher diff attacks in the set. But I do think the card's very strong.
Yeah, for me personally, this is one of the few times where the 2 check puts me off a card. Honestly,
Yeah.
Very, very rarely am I somebody that's like so. Like typically, if I'm putting in 2 check into my deck, I'm like, cool. I'm just rolling as if it wasn't there. Like that's just the best way to do it. I just don't know. I think it's maybe also the fact that I don't play enough chaos style decks as well. So I'm probably a bit like, where would I fit this into a deck?
Yeah. 100%. You do have plenty of ways to buff checks and things like that in chaos and that kind of thing. So it's not as big as it would be in other decks, but I do think the 2 check does bring it down a little bit. I think it's needed. Otherwise, this card would be a 4 of, I think, in pretty much every chaos deck,
Oh yeah,
regardless of symbol. If it's like the chaos attune, just being at the very worst, a 5 high for 5 that replaces itself on a 5 diff is really good. So, but even with the 2 check, I still think it's relevant.
yeah. So you think meta relevant?
I don't know. I don't. I do think it's really up there, but I think that's more of a personal preference rather than what I think the card will actually do. Because I think what you've said kind of sums up the card in a sense of a lot of people are going to get put off by that 2 check, so it's
Yeah,
not going to get ran. But I do think it's something that good players they will test it, they will experiment with it, they will try it, and see what they can make deck-wise to justify that 2 check. Like, I'm 100% going to be trying this in Godzilla, for example, because obviously buffing my own checks and things like that and having a card that replaces itself feels very nice. So yeah, I do think it's probably a sleeper. As much as I do like the card and have some personal bias towards it, I think it's a sleeper for now till someone ends up with it.
yeah. Until somebody like figures it out, it will not
Yeah,
be me
and
that
figures out
figures
the
it
build
out.
to make sure it's worth it. Yeah.
I would say it goes in between the two that are currently in sleeper.
I'll let you have that one.
It feels like, so the reason I'm thinking it goes kind of in the middle, right, is Fortitude's going to entirely depend on where the meta ends up for potential, whereas deck style could be with the potential of this one, which I feel is greater
Yeah,
as such. Again, you have an
I'll give you
override,
that
you can
one.
tell me no.
Oh no, I'll agree with you on that one. I agree with you on that one. You're the editor, so you have the final say.
The more you actually mentioned about the damage part of it, I was actually thinking, I was like, actually, I could see a couple of decks where I'm like, I might just run this, like, if I
Yeah,
could get a couple. I don't know if I'd run
I
a
think
full
that's what.
play set, but I feel like if you have like 1 or 2 in deck, You just have
Yeah,
this one card that's like immediately like, right, cool, this is the card you have to now deal with. Like I do like that a lot
100%.
actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just know
It's
I'll
like
probably
right. This
check
is
the
high.
first two.
All right, means you can't check them again. It's all
That
right.
is true. Let's move on. I think I changed the the list is correct. The next one on up is Coordinated Strike. So it's a 5 def, 5 mid for 1 damage. It's got
Mhm.
Deadlock Stun 4 weapon.
Yep.
And then the Blitz is Mill 3. This attack is +1 damage for each weapon attack in your discard pile. I think this is one of those cards that, depending on some of the builds, I think you just see in like every weapon style deck. Even people who aren't like necessarily weapon keyword characters. I've
Yeah.
actually built, ironically, Bearded Titan playing off of a weapon build,
All right. Yeah.
and now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, I could probably change it. Like the moment I had finished it, I looked at cards like this and I went, I could tweak that quite easily and run this instead.
Yeah.
I think
I
this
can see
card.
that.
I think this card has like the very easy chance of being one of those ones that, like, see if you're like, 'cause if you're milling out enough and you're playing into the long haul of a game, this damage could go mental. Like
It could.
average attacks index between what 20 to 24, roughly. So like, if you see a decent amount in that discard pile before you cycle, this becomes one of those attacks. It's just like this is immediately like threatening lethal.
Yeah. I can see that. I can see that.
The main thing I actually like about it is that deadlock feels relevant for once.
Yeah,
Because if
it is a relevant deadlock ability rather than just being like Deadlock Stun 2, where you just kind of think, well, you've got 15 foundations, I'm going to commit 2 of them. Wow. Like, committing 4 is a bit more substantial. You're essentially making it a 9 mid at that point.
yeah, and I feel as if like the meta we're maybe going to move into, I genuinely think people are going to build into deadlock because
Yeah, 100%.
there's not
There's not
enough
too many
deadlock.
incentives not to.
Yeah, like it feels like there's not enough to say I don't want to be in deadlock, but then there's cards like this that say I'm going to benefit from this now inherent meta.
Yeah, that's fair. That is very fair. But when it comes to my view on this card, I honestly don't like this card at all.
Oh,
Um, yeah, I can see it and I understand it. The first thing that jumped to my mind was like Toga 3, for example. So obviously in all three of the symbols, I am correct in thinking she has death.
what
Yeah,
decision?
I think she does. Being able to obviously you want weapons in the discard anyway for Toga's effect to put them in momentum, and then obviously being able to give this 3-2 at base if it's your first attack feels nice, but the fact that it's a mid puts me off the card a lot. And the fact that it's one of those cards where you have to have at least a few attacks in your discard pile for it to be relevant. If it's only 3 or 4 damage, people are just going to take that. That doesn't really matter. It's when it gets to the 6 and 7s and the 8s, but then at that point you've lost a lot of your attacks. So it's about having that balance. And for me, like for example, Wolfwood can use this really well as well, being able to mill for 3 damage and ranged weapons get 3 damage and stuff like that. So you are filling up your discard pile. But the mid zone for me just kind of ruins the card in a sense. I say this, and I will be beaten by someone using this at a regional, and guarantee that now that's going to happen at the next regional or something. But I just don't see it. With the amount of speed hit we have, the amount of good mid blocks we have, the amount of manipulation for zones we have, F5 mid for me just isn't doing it.
Yeah, no, I can see that.
But I can see it being ran. Just I don't rate the card.
That's fair. That's fair. Like, I wouldn't say this is. I don't think this is ever going to be meta relevant.
No.
Personally, I was looking at it more of a sleeper.
I think sleeper, low sleeper,
Low sleeper
me,
or
because
high fun local.
I think low sleeper because I will give it some credit. It can end games and it'll do well with that. It's just I don't see it doing much unless it catches you out, for example. But then at that
Yeah.
point, most of the cards could fill that slot anyway. So it's just essentially X attack kills you, and then this happens to be that attack, for example.
This is like the win more scenario.
Yeah. So I think there's potential there, but it's just on face with what we have access to, I don't rate the card very highly.
I'm wondering if there's like a crazy like self-mill deck where this could be like, because Eren Yeager can run this, can he not?
He can, yeah. He can run it if he wants.
Don't know,
If you
don't know
want
if
to
he's
run
got
a
that many
weapon attack,
weapons, I guess, but
yeah. I was going to say that's the main thing that limits it for me. If it just said attack, for example, then it would shoot straight up.
I feel
The
as if
fact
it
it is
said
limited
attack,
to
it
the
would be
weapon,
busted. Aye.
yeah,
Like, if it just
yeah,
said for each attack, it would 100% be a 2 check. Like,
yeah,
and
100%.
I'd
It would be
probably still
like we
run it.
saw the last one, yeah, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
It would be a lot better, but I think just obviously locking yourself to the weapon package, and then which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but there are certain characters who don't use that package as
Yeah, don't
well.
want to be running it. Yeah.
Yeah, like you mentioned Eren Yeager, for example. There's better packages he could run in a deck rather than the weapon package because he just doesn't do much, I don't think, with it compared to other characters like Wolfwood or Toga.
Yeah.
Or even maybe if you wanted to be something different like Younger Toguro. Obviously not the menace we once knew, but still relevant in a sense. So yeah, I think it's a sleeper. And then when someone beats me with it in a regional, they can shove it in my face and we'll move it up.
I will bump it up the moment that happens.
Yeah.
That is fair. No, I don't mind that. I don't mind that as a position. It makes sense. Right. Next up we have Short Work, 5 diff, 3 mid for 5 damage. It's got the weapon keyword. Oh, it's also a 2 check. Should say that straight away. Blitz says if your rival has more foundations than you, this attack gets plus X speed, X equals the difference. In the first form, from discard pile, thank God I read that full thing there. Sacrifice 1 foundation, add this card to your hand.
I like this. I think
do.
this is
I
about
like
relevant.
it. I like it, and I'm like,
Yeah.
it's
This is
yeah,
going to be defining, truthfully. The fact that you can guarantee an attack every single turn is ridiculous in some of these decks,
yeah,
like in the death symbol, especially being able to any character with death being able to guarantee that attack, guarantee that opener. It's a 3 mid for 5, but you can give it speed based on its own effect. You can give it speed based on other effects from characters. It just feels ridiculous. Like it feels so good being able to have that guaranteed resource every turn. Like you go down a foundation, but you can buff your hand size, make sure you have an attack to start off those chains to have more advantage. It just feels really good.
yeah.
Really
I'm
strong.
liking it. I'm liking it. I don't see my problem with this one was I didn't really like the blitz part of it, but
Yeah.
I can like 100% ignore the blitz part and just be like, yeah, it's there for the first form. Like the speed's
Exactly, yeah.
the speed's a happy bonus, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. Well, worst case scenario, you're getting an extra card to strip a card out of their hand. Is the worst. That's the flaw of this card that I look at. If they want to block it, if they don't, they take 5 damage, and which is just it's a free 5 damage every turn. You blow up a foundation, cool. You build more anyway. Like it just feels really strong. Deck again. I know we've said them a lot. But decks like Levi can buff the stats. Mikasa can buff the speed. And even if it's a case of you add the card to hand, there's no necessarily reason you have to play that card. It could just be a case of I want this card in hand. No, I've got another guaranteed mid block to build and pass with.
Yeah, but that's the thing as well, yeah, because you can hap it. I will say I'm definitely a fan of like one of the things I always kind of like talk about is such as like I don't like attacks that like people put in as blocks.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that this is very much a you can 100% just use this as a block. It's like
Oh, 100%.
it's coming back.
Yeah. 100%. You can do whatever you want with this card, and it's an extra card every turn, which just feels really great. There's cards that care about being destroyed, things like learning to harden from Undaunted Raid. If you destroy it, you draw a card as a death response.
Yeah.
So things like that, just saying, oh, I'll add this card to hand, then respond draw. I'm an 8-hander from a 6-hander now. Feels really good. So I think, yeah, even despite the 2 check, like this card needed to be a 2 check because having a free advantage every turn, and yes, it's a mid, And yes, it doesn't have the most damage, it's 5 damage, but there's ways you can deal with those stats. And the fact you have a card every turn to initiate chains, to put pressure on, and to make sure that you're advancing game state feels really strong.
100%. I initially was looking at this as like high sleeper, but I genuinely think like we've talked me into also saying meta relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is very strong. Like again, the main thing for me is obviously it is a very aggro-centric meta almost, at least over here in Europe, in the sense of we are pumping a lot of attacks out fairly quickly, having to deal with those attacks, having the resources on both sides, and being able to guarantee at least an extra card on every single one of those rotations feels really good. The fact it's a decent block zone as well to 2 mid, it's versatile how you can use it.
Yeah, it's genuinely
It
feels
is
relevant.
pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It just feels really so solid for me. That's why I think it's probably going to be a meta relevant card.
No, 100%. I can actually see it being there now. Like as I say, initially I was looking at like high sleeper mainly. I think mainly because the two check initially, and I don't really
Mhm.
rate the blitz. But
Yeah,
yeah, the first form just I think it just pushes it the upper
yeah.
echelons. Yeah, I'm fine with that. That makes. Do you think it's more or lower than high speed dive though?
I
I'm
think
going
it's
to say.
higher.
You think? Oh, I was going to say lower. Oh.
I think it's higher. I look forward to seeing the credits of you making changes to all my takes.
That's fair. That's fair. So we have the current reigning champ right now. Got work. All right, I can get behind this. Right, let's move on to the fire symbol, and we're starting off
Yeah.
with the 6 diff Colossus Steam Barrier, 0 mid, 8 damage. It's got powerful 2. Also got the Titan keyword, somewhat relevant to some stuff. This attack's damage cannot be reduced below printed by rival effects. Response, remove. After you block with this card, the blocked attack deals no damage and your rival loses 1 health. Can I
What's your
start?
thoughts on this one? Go for it.
So, I literally just mentioned this like not long ago. Probably some would say just a
And
card
about
ago.
running attacks as blocks?
I fucking hate running attacks as blocks. and I will always run them lower unless they're specifically doing something.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a small bit of credit. I like that you can mid block the off zones still dealing no damage and they
Yeah.
lose a life. I think it's a decent response. But
That response
that
can kill as well,
remove,
bear in mind as
yeah, the
well.
response can kill, but the remove on it is also pretty. It's like that's a hefty cost.
Yeah. Say it's a one-time use kind of thing. Kind of similar
Yeah,
to in the manga, obviously, with the steam barrier only being now and again with the transformations and stuff. It is thematic, but yeah,
yeah. I'll be
it is
honest. I
very
I
robust.
don't like this card at all.
No,
Do you know
I
what? Do you know what would actually sell this card to me? See if it wasn't Powerful 2 but EX2. I think I'd be
yeah,
sold on it a little bit.
I think that would sell me on it as well. Or if it was an off zone, the fact it's a mid,
Yeah,
it's like it doesn't feel great. Also, the fact that it says it's almost telling two different stories in a sense. This card, like saying it can't be reduced below printed due to rival effect, but giving it powerful 2. It's a case of, oh, well, I'll give it 2 damage because of discarded momentum. Right, well, I'll use my effects to bring it back
to bring
down.
it back down.
A case of, well, okay, kind of thing. Like, it just feels bad. Like, I can't see a world where I would be happy playing this as an attack on a 6 diff.
Yeah,
Um, like, unless my opponent was just didn't keep a mid block for some reason and it's dealing 4 damage, cool, I guess. But I like the block aspect of it. I really do like that. And it gives the fire attune symbol gives those decks with that symbol a bit more defense, which is very much needed in the fire symbol. But obviously because it's attuned, you're not going to run the decks in fire anyway. You're going to run it just as an extra little piece in
yeah,
sideboard, maybe to bring in against like throw decks, for example, or just different kind of things. So I don't really like the card. If it was a lower diff or if it was off zone, or if it had EX, I could get behind it as a sleeper.
Yeah.
But with none of those things being the case, I just don't think it's a very good SR. So I
Yeah,
think it
I'm
can
the
catch
same.
people out, and it can the fact it's like, for example, I know it's a different symbol, but something like I don't remember the card. It's the 3 diff Kirishima promo. That Omni blocks and has breaker 1. It's a case of
Oh,
at least you can
Unbreakable.
see that. Yeah, that something like that. Yeah, it's the fact of you can still see yourself playing that attack to give because 3 diff gives itself speed and it can do a little bit of a poke to finish a chain. Whereas this card, I just can't see playing it in any
Yeah.
way. So I think it's probably going to be a local fun card, and then
I also think
maybe
it's
catch people out.
yeah. I also think it's under Beast Titan though.
Yeah, I agree. I can see
Yeah.
Beast Titan doing some things with this card. I just don't see. I see the appeal with the block, but as an attack, I don't see the appeal in any way, especially with the fire attune symbol. If it had
Yeah.
different symbols where, like, for example, Recovery Girl could run it, or someone could give it throw, someone could reliably give it speed, enough speed for it to be relevant, then
Aye.
I could see the case being made. Like, obviously, you could run it in Mikasa, I guess, but you'd have to have used their response multiple times to give it the speed. Doesn't have any symbols with younger Toguro, for example, or elder Toguro, sorry, so you can't give it the do the whole one-shot thing to keep the damage and keep buff the speed. It just feels like it's just all kinds of different parts just not tying together with this card.
Yeah. Which is a bit of a shame because I think this
Yeah,
is legitimately the first actual SR that we're not impressed with.
yeah.
We needed a bearded tier.
We did, yeah. I do feel like the quality's gone up overall. It's just this card is just a little bit lacking, unfortunately.
Yeah, this is like the run to the letter clearly so far. Like
Yeah.
everything else I've seen, I'm like, yep. If I get this card, there'll be a deck that it goes in. But
Hmm.
this one, I'm just like, ah. Again, I'm probably like heavily biased as well because the moment a card's like an attack's designed to be a block, I'm just like, no, I just don't like it. It almost entirely goes against any game plan I ever set up. So it's just like one of those ones. Like it needs to be doing something kind of like drop work where it comes back.
Yeah.
Which is a shame. I will Colossus Steam Barrier. Yeah, you're lucky we don't have a bearded tier list yet. You've dodged the bullet.
Yeah.
Let's see the next one for Fire Attune Secret Rares, which is Tense Heat Blast. It's 5 diff, 5 mid for 5 with a 2 check. It's got Stun 0, Blitz. This attack is +1 to its stun rating for every 2 attacks in your removed pile. And then response remove. After this card is discarded during your combat phase, your rival commits 1 foundation. This is one of those cards that, like, there is a couple of characters, kind of like the Mecha Godzilla, like the Bionic and stuff,
Yeah.
where I could legit see this card being an absolute menace.
Oh, 100%. There are characters I can see running this really well. You've got Mechagodzilla, you've got the Eren from the set that
Yeah,
can flip
the actual
and
set.
removes
Yep.
2 from discard pile. You've got Woman from Girl Power. You've got Endeavor
Even
3,
Endeavor. Yeah, I was
obviously.
just going to say Endeavor 3 just wants to run this because you're going to
Yeah.
cycle so fast that, like, yeah, definitely attack's getting hit.
You have Dabby 2 as well as an option for, obviously, removes top 3 cards for 3 damage. So, you do have things here for this card. It's just how quickly it gets to the point where its stun's relevant is
Yeah,
the thing for me. Like, and then you've got to think as well, if you're going all in on this to get the stun high enough to be relevant, you've removed those attacks. There's no chance you're getting those back.
yeah.
And
I
then
think
all that for 5 damage to tap a few foundations feels a little bit lackluster to me, I think. Obviously, in decks like Mechagodzilla and Endeavor that can buff it, right? Works really well. Woman buffs it as well, really good. But it's just whether that incidental stun is good enough to run the card with it being a 2 check, or if you'd rather just be having more cards to push that game advantage state at that point.
Yeah, I think for me it's like there's a couple of characters that I'm like, you run 4 of them, you've got enough, you'll probably have enough mill on board with the response, trigger a few of them,
Mm.
like get a few of them out, get a little bit committed, get extra hits in, all that sort of stuff, and then things like Aaron on his transformation where you could pick what all you need really is one in the discard pile, and then
Yeah,
maybe at that point you've got enough removal in stage, or obviously like Endeavour 3 is such where you can then have this come in as like the opening stun out scenario.
yeah,
Is
mm-hmm.
kind of where I'm coming from, thinking of how
Yeah,
I would play it. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Like you
yeah.
would build up to this being one of these kind of like aggressive stun decks on that one kill.
I can see that. Yeah,
Like inherently, it feels fast enough. The flat 5 damage also feels nice. Like,
yeah.
your opponent's going to
Like, I
have
think
to like look at stuff.
if you see
Like
it late enough in the game to the point where it's relevant, I think it definitely helps and it definitely makes an impact. It probably feels a bit bad seeing it early, and it feels a bit awkward if you, for example, cycle and you cycle your 2 copies of this. It's a case of, well, I've lost that avenue to push, for
yeah,
example, in some of those decks. If you're using this as like a push kill card, kind of initiating your kill turn kind of thing, if that makes sense.
yeah,
So it's definitely worth keeping an eye on, I think. I think it is a good card. It's just finding the right build and finding the right way to utilize the card. I just don't think it's generally going to be used, but it's in certain decks it is going to be
yeah. Like I feel like
worth
it's going to
keeping
be
an eye on.
floating in a few decks, but I don't
Yeah.
feel like I can't see it being like every fire deck wants to run this.
No, exactly. Yeah. Like the few we listed, I think are probably the ones where you can see it being ran, but otherwise probably not. Especially with that 2 check. If it was a
Yeah,
3, people could maybe justify in their deck going, "Oh, I've maybe cycled a few attacks. All right, this has got a couple of stun, and we'll push that way." But and then the response for the discard is nice because obviously, unlike other cards, it doesn't care about being discarded by a rival effect.
yep,
So being able to discard this to force your opponent to commit a foundation feels nice. And then obviously 1 copy of this fuels more copies with the being removed, for example. So it does feel good. I think it's worth keeping an eye on, definitely.
yeah. I think we're it's definitely not high, but it's
I think it's middle of sleeper, I think.
yeah. Let's jump in next one, which I have actually
Ooh.
been looking at this one quite a bit now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mister Despair is a 4 diff, 2 high for 6 damage. Got ranged as a keyword, 1 high block. Blitz. If you have gained health this turn, this attack is +3. Response. After this attack deals damage, the next card you try to play ignores aggressive difficulty. Oh,
I love this card.
this is this is like one of those cards that puts a keyword back on the map.
Yeah.
And range has been quite slept on for a while.
100%.
I
I
don't
think
think
this is
I
a
don't
very
think
good card.
anymore. Oh, this is such a good card.
I think it puts ranged back in contention. It puts the life gain decks back in
Yeah.
contention. Decks like Recovery Girl use this incredibly well.
Oh yeah.
Decks like Yamea coming out in this set use this card incredibly well. I think this is a really good card, and I think this is definitely something to keep an eye on because I think any deck that can run this with a little bit of life gain will just be off to the races. Honestly, with this card.
I think also it's on like obviously it's on life. It's on that perfect symbol for a lot of cards that are also saying ignore progressive difficulty. Like you've
Exactly.
got
Yeah.
the action as well. What's the one I always forget what it's called from the Clash Reunion.
Oh yes, the future is now, I
Yeah,
believe.
Futures Now, that's the one.
Yeah.
So like there is a bunch of setups where it's like this could like hit really hard and just keep rolling with attacks.
Yeah. Yeah, and being able to play multiple of these in a turn to ignore that progressive feels really good as well if you can get that avenue going. Um, Things like meeting Hanji, I believe the three diffs called. It's based latent skill on life essentially. Some of the kit from Yumiya being able to gain that life to give the speed. Um, Tasty Rift to refill hands. It feels like it's a perfect card for the life attune. Um, it's good in all aspects of those decks. It's good in the range decks that can run this. It's a good block. On a 4 diff, it's a 5 high for 6 a lot of the time at base because you've gained life in this type of deck. Even if you haven't, it's still decently started. 2 high for 6 on and off zone doesn't feel terrible. And you can obviously modify the stats with that. I honestly really like this card, and I think it's definitely a contender for things that we'll see in the meta. Obviously, a lot of people are talking about things like Reiner and previously Berthold, for example, but I do think some life decks are going to creep back in with a bit more of a mid-range slash control game, and this card will really help with that.
Yeah. I think this is either low meta relevant or high.
I think it's in meta. I really do.
Like I just want to say it's meta relevant, but I feel as if it still needs the person to like show the deck kind of scenario.
I can see that.
Just
I
because
think
it's one
the
of
thing
those
that
kind of
irks me, the thing that makes me put it higher than some of the things we have in Sleeper, in a life, I can see any life deck run this card. Whereas
yeah,
the cards we've got previously, I can't see every deck in those symbols running it.
yeah.
But for me, I think it will be low meta. I really do.
I'm fine with it. I love the card. I am hoping
Yeah.
when I get my boxes that I get a few of these so I can actually play it. And
With you. Someone's ambitious.
it's true. Yeah, very, very. If there's any one secret rare right now that I just get the full play set from my boxes, it's this one.
What you're saying is if you get any more, you'll pass them to your friendly co-host, yeah?
Yes, that is true. Adam has been asking for some.
Ah, aha, aha.
Right, let's jump on to the. This is one that I'm just looking at this. They've all been roughly like 5 diffs, a couple of floating in at 6. So this is the first 7 diff that we've seen at least.
Yeah.
So we've
Oh,
got
we've got a big one coming later, don't worry.
yeah. Oh, we've got a big one. Stomp of the female Titan. So 7 diff, 3 mid for 3. Got kick. It's got Titan. It's got response. Before this attack receives a speed and or damage bonus from another card's effect, double that bonus. You play this response up to 3 times during this attack.
Doesn't have moonfish symbols, I hit the card.
I was just about to ask, is this on Simple Women? I know.
Nope.
Oh, they've thought it all through.
No, joking aside, I'm not a massive fan of the card, truthfully. Like, being able to increase buffs 3 times feels cool, but eh. If you're having to put that much into one attack, because usually a lot of your buffs will be like once per turn, for example,
Yeah.
or like once per turn effects to give speed or give damage. If you're doing it on the 7 diff, it's a start of the 3 mid for 3 when they can just bring the stats back down, or things like resets knack this card, like evade and copy neuters this card, barrier shield
Oh
neuters
yeah.
it. You put everything into it, and they just play one card and say nope, it's not doing its thing. It has no protection for any of the stat bonuses you give it. Again, on a 7 diff, just feels a little bit,
It's a steep cost.
yeah. Like committing a 3 for the committing 4 on this and you check a 3 feels bad.
Yeah.
And if some of those pieces are what you're using to give your stats, then it just feels even worse. Obviously, you can buff it with things like Ymir to give the flat 2 speed, which becomes 4 speed. Things like Carbalon to give it damage. So there are things you can do with it, but it just, for me, just feels a little bit overcosted for what it's bringing to the table versus your opponent being able to deal with it. Like if it had a little bit of protection built into it, like wants to negate debuffs, for example, by like discarding momentum once per turn or flipping a foundation or something like that, then, or if it was a little bit higher base statted, I could get behind the card. But
Yeah,
starting as a 7 diff 3 mid for 3, that just feels a little bit like you need to put a lot into it. Doesn't feel the best for me. It just feels. It's definitely a build around, don't get me wrong. It's definitely a build around that you can work on. But you have to put a lot more into it than your opponent has to do to deal with it, in my mind.
yeah. This is starting to go into the territory when it comes to these higher diff attacks, where I'm like, is the payoff worth the potential bad check?
Yeah.
And this is like the prime. This is one of the prime examples of being like, no, not really. Like, I can't. Do you know off the top of my head, I can't even think of like that many cards that even say like plus speed and damage, where it's like not just a 1/1 as well. You know,
Yeah. So
where
say
you
for
can.
example you give this 2/2 3 times, so it's a 9/9 that they can debuff.
Yeah,
Cool, I guess.
yeah. It's
But
like it's kind of one of those ones where it's like it could be forced into being like relevant in the sense of like you have to now deal with it, but there's enough cards out there that just deal with it.
yeah. Like, don't get me wrong, I think I mentioned it earlier, something like with the other Life Attune card, something like Recovery Girl could use this quite well. Commit 3 carbo loadings, give it 18 damage, and give it throw. Isn't
Yeah,
the worst thing in the world, don't get me wrong, but there's there's there are ways you could deal with that, and there's ways you can deal with giving this a lot of speed. If you just pump all the speed, all right, it's 3 damage, cool, I'll take 3.
aye, that's
In
it.
a format where we've got 30 plus characters on the regular now, as 6-handers. So it just, to me, it just feels like it's a cool card, but it's understated for what it is, or it came into the game a little bit too late versus what we're seeing in the same set. For me,
Yeah, like at best, I could see somebody maybe running like a one of this as like a kind of gotcha moment, where like they've
yeah,
got enough speed and damage on field, you're not really ready for it, and then they come out with it.
100%. Yeah,
But
like don't get me wrong, I'd probably try this as a 1 or a 2 of in Recovery Girl, like I say, just to obviously have that big threatening throw potential,
yeah,
and see if my opponent has the answer for it. But otherwise, outside of stuff like that, as like a 1 of like cheeky tech piece that you can pump into it a little bit, just feels a little bit lackluster for me. So yeah, I think it's a cute card. It could be a good build around, and it could catch people out quite well. But on face, it just seems very lackluster.
yeah, it's just not hitting.
No,
Way to put it in
I
fun,
think for me,
people. I know it's fun though, but like,
I think it would be. I think it's above Beast Titan. Honestly, as much as I like Beast Titan, I can see this being into a couple of decks where it can close out games. Whereas
that's
Beast
true because you
Titan,
can't put Beast Titan index. Yeah, that's true. Yep,
exactly, yeah, 'cause it
yep.
doesn't have the difficulty or check anymore.
That does say that actually. Beast Titans not even got a 6 check anymore. Aye, that's very true.
Yeah.
Let's jump to the next one. So now I think we're going to the order.
Yep.
So this one, we've seen the Obsidian for it, and I just like the Obsidian version of this better. But
Yeah. The Obsidian's
pressing the
gorgeous with all these cards.
advantage is just
Mhm.
so cool in
Yeah.
Obsidian. So we got pressing the advantage, a 5 diff, 3 low for 5, got a 2 check. It's got EX2 in charge, and Blitz. Commit 1 rival foundation. This attack gets plus X damage. X equals the number of your rival's committed foundations.
Yeah. This
I,
is
I like this.
This is how we all remember Indiscriminate Shock.
Yes.
But this is better. This is what Indiscriminate Shock thankfully wasn't,
Oh
but
god, die.
damn. Like, it's very good. It solves all the problems that Indiscriminate Shock had, honestly. It's
Yeah.
selective committal at
Yeah.
blitz speed, so it's hard to play around that ability. It's so you could commit their reset or their best defensive piece on play,
Yeah.
and giving it damage based on that is very strong. And then having The main issue with Indiscriminate was a case of, well, it's a 3 low for 5 that's getting a lot of damage. It's still a 3 low, it's going to get blocked. Whereas this is a 3 low but has EX, so you can solve that issue, which just feels really good. Especially in conjunction with some of the other cards in the set, for example, that can selectively commit or commit multiple foundations, or things like Walk the Dog that work well with this. It just feels really strong, and a character that uses this quite well would use this quite well anyway. From testing I'd done previously was with Yu Yu Hakusho was Toya, being able to defensively commit your opponent's foundations on block to then be able to say, well, actually, this attack's going to do a lot because you're committed out.
Yep.
Feels really nice. So yeah, I really like this card, and even with the 2-check, it's a 2-check that's justified.
Yeah, I think the fact, as you say, it's like it's indiscriminate, but like with all the fixes, yeah, the 2 kind of needs to be there. Like I think if that had a 3-check, it would
100%.
just be silly.
Yeah, 100%. Like this, this gives the order symbol another way to kill,
Yeah.
apart from just like Walk the Dog with powerful, essentially. Yeah, it really helps, and I think a lot of decks can abuse this and use this quite well. So I think it's definitely a scary card that's going to crop up a lot in regionals up and coming.
Yeah, especially also that there's no gate to how much damage it gets as well.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no
And if
cap.
this meta kind of goes into this idea of probably deadlock as a thing, like, oh yeah, you're gonna get some good runs, commit them out, and then hit this at the end, and it's just got crazy stats.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a lot of damage coming in with some good speed behind it as well.
Yeah, I'm looking at this. I think this honestly goes to the top of Sleeper.
I think it could. I think you could put it low meta relevant. I really do.
Low meta,
I think it puts.
well, true, actually, true. Yeah.
I think it puts order back in contention as a symbol that can close out games reliably, and it's even on not on decks that are on order will have an order character. Things like Bionic Menace giving it 2/2, Endeavor giving it speed. Again, Toya that can commit out on blocks. It just feels really solid. Things like Krista from this set that can give attacks stun 1 with wall counters. Some of our kit that can give things stun 1, committing the board out, being an off-zone block as well. Like I know we're already talking about having a lot of lows with things like Godzilla using City Rampage, Black Abyss, Pierce and Thorn Lances, etc. That kind of package. But this puts it on those lows on another symbol where damage is just very relevant. So it's nice to see, rather than the destruction route that doesn't have a lot of payoff, a case of you want to go into deadlock, I'm going to tap your board out, and then I'm going to do a lot of damage based on that. It was really solid.
Yeah.
So,
So for me, like the only thing I've kind of got is it's like, does this card put people in the mindset of playing order decks? That's where I'm kind of on the 50-50 scale now.
I think it does.
Out of the 6 symbols, I think the order's I'd kind of say it's probably one of the weaker symbols being looked at, just because it's been a while since we've really seen like the order symbol being a pure menace at events.
But we have seen an Order Endeavor 3.
Yeah, I was going to say there's the odd
the American
outlier.
Regionals.
Yeah, where it's like
pilot by people like Tim Keefe.
Yeah, I mean, but you've got guys like Tim Keefe who could play Bearded Titan and would probably do very well with it. So.
Yeah, 100%. My thing with the order symbol has always been it has all the answers, it doesn't close games. This solves that issue. Because a lot of the order attacks were, for example, for the stun package, low damage. Things like if you really wanted to run it, Smashing Nomu, you've got Leaping Acrobatic Kick from the Yu Yu Hakusho, and then obviously your big things like ISO Execution, Walk the Dog, some of the cards from this set that give stun on foundations as well. It all feels very solid, and you have a lot of utility pieces, a lot of cancels, a lot of draw on the order symbol, and this card can help close out those games after you've gotten that advantage. Is for me. And then even if you don't play it on the order symbol but on an order attuned character, it's a nice card to just say, well, you've blocked 4 4 or 5 of my attacks. Here's this card at the end with your tapped out board that's going to kill you.
Yeah, no, that
So,
is fair. I'll give you that.
and even if it doesn't kill you, even as an opener to say, right, I'm gonna start with this card. I'm gonna commit your best defensive piece and throw this 3 low for 6 at you that I can put stats on. Even that feels really solid. The selective committal feels really good as well.
As I say, I think for me, I will put it in. You get your override. We'll put it low, bit irrelevant. I'm just
All right,
waiting to
we'll
see.
move it later on. It's fine.
Yep, I'm just waiting to see like how much it changes the mindset of people to switch to like order, or as you say, like throw it into like order of tune scenarios.
I think it could be the main thing. I think for me, it'll change is because people haven't necessarily ran stun here as much over the last couple of formats because of things like indiscriminate going, electric shock, jolt, sorry, and not really having many stun payoffs apart from it just being a bit annoying.
Yeah.
Whereas this card makes people think, right, I need foundations to block this. I need ways to block this. I need to try and not have my board completely tapped out when this is a problem, and this could be an issue. So I think it does change, not necessarily change people to play in this card, but people have to change their decks to play against this card.
Yeah,
Why I think it's relevant.
that's fair. Very rounded on. one that I will admit I did not have a real rebuttal for.
Lawyers.
So we're going to move on. We're going to move on to one that I like because it's got wall counters.
Yes,
So we
I like
have
this one too.
Wall Maria's Might, the 5 diff, 5 low for 5. It's got charge and ranged keywords and blitz, add 1 wall counter to a card in your stage, then draw 1 card for every 2 wall counters on that card. Responds after you block and attack with this card, draw 1 card.
I really
So,
like this.
I love the blitz. I hate the response, but for obvious reasons. But I will say I don't
nice to have
mind
that,
the
though.
response there being because it just replaces itself. So it's one of those ones where it's not the end of the world. But oh my, that blitz is going to be fun.
Oh yeah, that blitz is so good. Obviously the response is nice. Obviously you're not running the card for the response, which I like about it. It's just a nice incidental bonus of the card.
Yeah.
But that blitz feels so good. Being able to selectively put a wall counter on something and draw 2 for every draw a card for every 2 counters on that card feels really nice. So I really like the card. Main thing for me is it'll depend on how relevant the wall counter characters end up being. As much as I think there are a lot of good ones that have the order attuned symbol, all the ones we've seen at least are good for me. Like I think Krista's good, I think Owen's good, I think Hannah's good, but it's just going to be a case of how relevant they end up being to the game. The wall counters to matter, because obviously it by itself doesn't draw you a card unless you have a wall counter on something. So then it's a case of, do you build around wall counters on different things? Do you build around things like fortify walls that stockpile wall counters every turn and then move them to your character for effects? Or do you try to build a character that can have those effects? So I think it opens a lot of interesting deck building choices with the whole wall counter archetype. I really do like it, and this card helps round that off really well. I really like it.
Yeah, this one just goes into that kind of, and that whole, like, every wall character just feels as if they inherently get a lot of counters on them.
Yeah.
Like I can't see this. I can't really see this really being a card that just says draw 1, for instance. You know.
Yeah. At very worst, if your character's got 1 wall counter on it, or you've got a foundation with a counter on it, then play this to get the 1 card. It's still replacing itself. But it does dictate how you build your deck. It does dictate the archetype that people are expecting, and then whether that's a relevant archetype or not, we'll see with the upcoming events of regionals and things like that. But I think there is a lot of potential with this card, and it rounds the archetype off really well.
Definitely. Like,
I think
for me,
for that
this
reason.
is. Go for it.
Oh no, go ahead. You're all right.
I think for me, it's one of those ones where the secret rares. maybe not on like meta relevancy, but it perfectly encapsulates symbol direction they went with it.
I agree.
The rest of them
This is
feel
what a
as if
secret
they're
rare
doing
should be.
stuff, but this one feels
Yeah,
almost perfectly thematical to like what secret rare should be for these characters on Sim.
I agree. I agree. The secret rares should be facilitating and should be supporting an archetype, and this does that perfectly, I think. Everything about this card's great. Adding the wall counters, drawing cards, and then replacing itself on block. All of those things just feel really good. And being relevant stats as well.
Yeah, the stats are so
With
relevant.
decent keywords. Yeah. With being good keywords as well as charge and range. It does just feel everything about this card feels great.
Yeah, yeah. I'm biased because I love all the wall characters. It's like I can just be like, I
Yeah.
put 4 of this in every one of them before I
Oh,
even look at
100%.
the rest of the attack package. Like
Yeah. If
it's
you
it's
have access
nice
to
knowing
4 of
there's
this,
like it's nice knowing that there's like specifically like a card where I'm like, this goes in every deck that has wall counters. So obviously there's 3. There'll probably be more, but there's
yeah.
enough ways to like build wall counters as well and then flip them about and sort of thing. So it's like even on certain other characters, like you could still play
Yeah.
this.
Even if you don't run wall counter characters, you have foundations like fortify walls that can get the counters every turn
Yeah,
and use for different effects. It feels really solid. I do really like the card as well. Like I said, it just feels there's not a bad thing about this card for me. Even having a good off zone block in a like I said earlier in a meta where low zones are more relevant than they've ever been.
yeah,
So even with that, it feels like if you have 4 of it in a wall character, that should be your foundation for the deck. You shouldn't think about that at all. And
oh,
then
100%, yeah.
the rest of it, I can see it being run in other characters depending on what you run as well. So I do really like the card.
Just one of
I
those
think
ones
it's
as well where it's like you can play enough of these, even if like you're not going crazy, right, on wall counters. A 5 low
yeah,
5 is still very relevant.
yeah.
Even if you look
505
at it, play
could
one,
replace itself either way.
add a counter, right? You might not get the initial draw. Play the second one. Now you're getting the draw at least. Like it still facilitates itself to like how often you play them.
Yeah, 100%. And if like you say, even if you're not running anything that gives wall counters, you can do that. And then if you're running anything that gives at least one wall counter, like for example, there's a common foundation, a set in the one diff response when you play it, you put a wall counter on a foundation in your stage, put a card in your stage. So even playing something like that into this just feels facilitating that draw. This feels really solid. So I do very much enjoy what the card's doing. I just don't know. I think for me, it's a high sleeper only because I don't know how relevant the wall characters are going to be. Like, I
Yeah,
think they're good, and I think they're going to do well, but until that's meant to be seen, I think it's a high sleeper with an asterisk that could be moved up quite severely.
yeah. I'm kind of like on this. It's like the 3 characters. I mean, it really comes down to really how well Erwin does. I think. I feel as if he's like
Yeah,
the most talked about between the 3. I think Krista has some talk about her, so I'm kind of like 50-50. I don't really know where I'm at with her yet. I personally think
yeah.
that Wish Brock Lesnar is the best though, but because I feel as if like it's actually like the perfect card for him, just being
Yeah,
able to like block and feel like because you literally have to block 2 attacks and it says draw 1 now, just from you playing the game. It feels
yeah.
very nice to facilitate his play style.
Oh, 100%. I do very much enjoy like I say, what the character is doing. What characters are doing with this card, excuse me, and just overall, I just feels really solid. Um, there's nothing, there's nothing about this card that I don't think is worth talking about, even in characters outside of the wall counter stuff. Things like Mecha Godzilla Kiryu could potentially you draw 1 playing this, and if you have wall counters, you draw more. It feels really nice. You draw 2 on block when you play it, feels
Yeah,
good. Things like Endeavor can use this well. Um, being able to give it stats and again replace itself. Um, there's just a lot of different things you can do with this, really, and I really like it. I really like it. I think it's definitely. I think for me, I could make the case of being meta, but I think it's probably the top of the sleepers for me. I really do. I
Yeah,
think that's where it sits for now.
I'm happy with it. So solely because again, like for me personally, like meta relevant, it has to be moving the needle on what people play. I
Yeah.
think it's a very easy auto include in a handful of characters, but I don't know whether or not it bumps those characters into consistently seeing play.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, I like it because once we know if those decks get tried and tested and they work, like yeah, it immediately.
hmm
Right, shall we move on to the big boy himself?
Yep. That sounds good to me.
The 13 diff Colossus Thermal Blast. 0 mid block, 7 mid, 7. It's got a 4 check, it's got range, it's got Titan, it's got Blitz. Your rival flips 5 foundations in response. After this attack deals damage to your rival, Ruin 13. In brackets, so anyone doesn't know. Ruin 13. Your rival sacrifices 13 face type foundations.
Just to make sure that's in there, yeah.
Yeah, just in case you didn't know what Ruin did.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Just in case. Oh, no, this card's a doozy.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was talk when this card was initially spoiled with Shiki Wakamaru
Yep.
from Yu Yu Hakusho being able to
Replay it.
it's like, oh, turn 2, I'm just going to play this for free because I can. Very worst, it pretty much flips your board at that point in the game. Best case, you lose your board.
Yep.
There are still homes for this deck. Things like Recovery Girl to give this throw is just silly if you don't have to throw hit. Just a case of, oh, you lose all your face down foundations if you don't deal with this throw. But it's a 13 diff.
Yeah.
So it's going to be hilarious when you get it off. But the 10 times you try to do that beforehand and it doesn't work is going to feel terrible.
Yep. I want to love this card so much.
I really do. Yeah. The
I
card
feel
it's so funny.
yeah.
And it'll be
For me personally, it feels like such a retro card. I have a handful
great
of
ways to abuse it in retro.
yeah. So like for instance, like in retro, everyone knows me as the guy. I will 100% be putting at least one of these in Goro because all my face times count as 2 foundations. Not that hard to pass this check. Like
Yeah, exactly.
I will do that immediately and
Yeah,
swing
bar
this
check the
7 mid
3
for
shucks
11.
anyway.
Like cause them to flip out their board. Like even as a Goro player, if somebody hits me with this, I'm like, yes, I will flip 5 foundations. Thank you for 10.
I'll flip 5 and then pray I can block it.
I just in retro, I feel as if there is a lot of homes for this character, this card. Sorry,
Yeah.
It opens up a big wide picture for that scenario to be the case. In standard, I think how's the best way to describe this? I think this card is entirely going to be based on the play style that we eventually adopt into this new meta.
I think so, yeah.
If
we end up
people-
being as aggro as we were last format,
Yeah.
it doesn't have a home.
Yeah.
But if we go to more deadlock-based, longer games,
Yeah, mid-control
where things are a bit more back and forth, yeah, I do think that there is potential for this card.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned earlier, things like Recovery Girl use this quite well. Anyone that can put stats on this can use it quite well. Things like Reina can maybe use it quite well with the reliable ruin and things like that. So even if this doesn't hit, you're going to eventually ruin their board.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do like this card. I do think it's fun tier though.
Yep.
Until you see how things pan out with the meta. But when you get this, the one game you get this going and you get it to work, it's going to feel soul destroying for your opponent. It's going to feel hilarious for you doing
100%. 100%.
So, which I think is great for an SR, but when it comes to competitive viability, I just don't think it's quite there.
Yeah, like, and as I say, it's entirely based on like where the meta goes and where the play style goes. I think even like because meta aside, especially in like the sort of EU side of things, we're more aggressive on the plays.
Oh yeah,
100%. So the setup to seeing this getting played, I'm like, I can't see it being played here.
No.
In Oceania, I could see this card being played because it's just batshit crazy and it's fun.
Yeah.
And they ideally play the style I prefer the most. In
Mhm.
America, I don't think anyone will touch it because they're too statted, and it's
I
just
could
like
see
this
it though.
doesn't. I could see it maybe in like a couple of decks that maybe operate it, but in the wider picture, I think the
Yeah.
numbers off it.
Yeah.
I
Like for
don't think
example,
it
in like a
fits
longer
the.
game, I could see. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was gonna say in a format with longer games, I could see like a King Ghidorah being able to fish this every turn to be able to blitz and flip the rivals' foundations when they're starting to have pieces to deal with. So, for example, obviously it's a very high cost and effect to do that, but I could see that being an avenue. Ways to cheat this card, things like obviously it's got the infinity symbol, so things like Sea Rampage can make it easier to play this in certain decks. But again, I just think it's very much fun tier and very much if it works, it's great. If it doesn't, it feels terrible.
Yeah, I will say though, I feel as if it won once, but it has to go. So
I think so, yeah.
solely based on that kind of scenario of the payout when it does work, like
Yeah.
there's going to be no bigger joy when you get to like turn like, the people playing next to you and be like, I just managed to get Rune 13 off.
Yeah. Like, how did you win that game? I blew up 13 of my opponent's face down foundations.
Yeah,
Like
and I think
that's
it's
going to
also
be something that you
nice.
can talk about in locals.
Oh yeah, it's like that. That's like your moment, especially if you get like a high end player and you get them with it.
Yeah.
It's like that's the kind of thing you end up telling the kids about.
Oh, 100%. Or someone new coming into the game plays a deck and gets that off, and they're like, "Oh, I like this game. That was hilarious. That was really fun." Kind of thing. Like it opens those dialogues, which is really good.
I wonder whereabouts would you place this if it was Spotlight as the format though?
What the 13 div?
Yeah, does it
I think
change
I
at
would
all?
still have it. I think I would still have it in the same. If it was just Attack on Titan Spotlight, I think I would have it in the same because it's still, if anything, I think it goes lower in the sense of it's harder to do damage without some of the tools in other sets.
Fair.
How about yourself?
Yeah, I was just wondering because I think for me it's always going to be fun local. Like
Yeah.
I can't ever see there being a day where it's meta relevant,
No,
and
100%.
I can't really see the potential of it like spiking anywhere as such. So it's like one of those ones like I think it's just a cool card that at least in retro I'll definitely have it getting played. Like I need at least one.
Yeah.
Ideally, hopefully I get one.
Yeah. I mean, if you want an Obsidian one.
That is true. To be fair, I am not opposed to that. Just a one off, and it's just a nice shiny. Yep, I could
If
go
you
down
run
with
it as a
that.
one of, it needs to be the nice one, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, so I go full magpie with the retro deck now.
100%.
Well, we rattled through that pretty easily.
Yeah.
I think that was a good listing. So
Yeah, I think so.
I think we will wrap up there. And for everyone watching, sub to the channel, Dobbers, much appreciated. Like, comment, send it to your gran, all the works. And yeah,
You
for
need to know Attack
myself,
on Titan's relevant.
that's it. So for myself, I'll catch you all later. And yourself, Greg.
Yep. Thank you for watching and see you on the next one.
Later on, everyone. Bye.
Bye.